A reading from the second book of Maccabees. Eleazar, one of the foremost scribes, a man of advanced age and noble appearance, was being forced to open his mouth to eat pork. But preferring a glorious death to a life of defilement, he spat out the meat and went forward of his own accord to the instrument of torture, as people ought to do who have the courage to reject the food, which it is unlawful to taste even for love of life. Those in charge of that unlawful ritual meal took the man aside privately, because of their long acquaintance with him, and urged him to bring meat of his own providing, such as he could legitimately eat, and to pretend to be eating some of the meat of the sacrifice prescribed by the king. In this way, he would escape the death penalty and be treated kindly because of their old friendship with him. But Eleazar made up his mind in a noble manner, worthy of his years, the dignity of his advanced age, the merited distinction of his grey hair, and of the admirable life he had lived from childhood. And so he declared that above all, he would be loyal to the holy laws given by God. He told them to send him at once to the abode of the dead, explaining, "At our age it would be unbecoming to make such a pretense. Many young people would think the 90-year-old Eleazar had gone over to an alien religion. Should I thus pretend for the sake of a brief moment of life, they would be led astray by me, while I would bring shame and dishonor on my old age. Even if, for the time being, I avoid the punishment of men, I shall never, whether alive or dead, escape the hands of the Almighty. Therefore, by manfully giving up my life now, I will prove myself worthy of my old age, and I will leave to the young a noble example of how to die willingly and generously for the revered and holy laws." Eleazar spoke thus, and went immediately to the instrument of torture. Those who shortly before had been kindly disposed now became hostile toward him, because what he had said seemed to them utter madness. When he was about to die under the blows, he groaned and said, "The Lord in his holy knowledge knows full well that although I could have escaped death, I am not only enduring terrible pain in my body from this scourging, but also suffering it with joy in my soul, because of my devotion to him." This is how he died, leaving in his death a model of courage and an unforgettable example of virtue, not only for the young, but for the whole nation. The word of the Lord.
The responsorial psalm. The response is, "The Lord upholds me." O Lord, how many are my adversaries? Many rise up against me. Many are saying of me, "There is no salvation for him in God." The Lord upholds me. But you, O Lord, are my shield, my glory. You lift up my head. When I call out to the Lord, he answers me from his holy mountain. The Lord upholds me. When I lie down and sleep, I wake again, for the Lord sustains me. I fear not the myriads of people arrayed against me on every side. The Lord upholds me.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. At that time, Jesus came to Jericho and intended to pass through the town. Now, a man there named Zacchaeus, who was a chief tax collector and also a wealthy man, was seeking to see who Jesus was. But he could not see him because of the crowd, for he was short in stature. So he ran ahead and climbed to a sycamore tree in order to see Jesus, who was about to pass that way. When he reached the place, Jesus looked up and said, "Zacchaeus, come down quickly, for today I must stay at your house." And he came down quickly and received him with joy. When they saw this, they began to grumble, saying, "He has gone to stay at the house of a sinner." But Zacchaeus stood there and said to the Lord, "Behold, half of my possessions, Lord, I shall give to the poor, and if I have extorted anything from anyone, I shall repay it 4 times over." And Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is a descendant of Abraham. For the Son of Man has come to seek and to save what was lost." The Gospel of the Lord.
The first reading comes from 2 Maccabees 6:18-31. This is the story of Eleazar, a very elderly, wise man of the Jews. Remember, yesterday we heard about how Antiochus Epiphanes had instituted a persecution against the Jews. Circumcision was forbidden, the sacred books were burned, and people were forced to sacrifice to the pagan gods and eat pork in public, just to prove that they weren't keeping the dietary laws. Well, Eleazar is highly respected by the Hellenistic authorities. They don't want to punish him because they know he's a good man. Therefore, they offer to pull a fast one over on the people. They'll pretend that they're serving him pork when they're actually serving him a different type of meat. Eleazar firmly refuses their offer because he realizes that if he eats whatever type of meat and the people think it's pork, then he'll have scandalized them. He'll have led them astray and they will sin because of him. Therefore, he offers himself up to death at 90 years old so that he can give a good example to the young people, so that they can see that someone in Israel is keeping the law of Israel. And because of that, he is in fact put to death. We hear at the end that he's an example of nobility, and his record of virtue was not only for the young, but for the whole people of Israel. The Gospel is from Luke 19:1-10. It's the story of Zacchaeus the tax collector who lives in Jericho. Now, tax collectors weren't liked in Israel because they collected taxes for the Romans, and they very often cheated the people, and they had the soldiers on their side, so there was no recourse from their decisions. In fact, tax farming was the way that taxes were often collected, in which somebody would put up a bid for a county, pay it up front, and whatever he collected in that territory was his. So there was no incentive for honesty because whatever was collected that was extra went in his own pocket. Zacchaeus therefore would have been hated, and the fact that he climbed a sycamore tree put him at great danger because you could almost see the kids throwing stones at Zacchaeus because he's a hated figure, and you can see the parents of the kids giving them stones. Well, Zacchaeus has climbed the sycamore tree to see Jesus. He's short of stature. What does Jesus say to Zacchaeus? Hurry down, because salvation will visit your house today. Notice, salvation will visit his house that very day. In the Gospels of Luke and John, salvation is something that occurs when Jesus comes into the story. As soon as we know Jesus and his love, we're already saved. In the writings of Paul and the other synoptics, salvation is something that occurs at the end of time. We're saved from the fires of hell at the final judgment. So there's 2 different meanings of salvation. If somebody comes up to you on the street and says, "Are you saved?" you should probably answer, "Do you mean as St. Luke means it or as St. Paul means it?" Or you could answer, "Already, but not yet. I'm already experiencing the joys of heaven here on earth, but it isn't completely fulfilled. That will happen on the last day." Jesus goes to Zacchaeus' house because Zacchaeus needs him. Jesus reaches out to sinners, tax collectors, people who are excluded because he realizes they're alienated. They're kept at a distance from society, and he doesn't want that. He wants to embrace them in his love. And what is Zacchaeus' response? That he's going to pay back whatever he stole manyfold. And what does Jesus say? This man too is a son of Abraham, and the Son of Man has come to seek out what was lost and find it. That Jesus is concerned with sinners. Very often in our churches, we think that God reaches out especially to those who are good, those who have proved that they're true Christians. But Jesus most of all reaches out to those who most need it. And likewise, our church community should do the same. They shouldn't sit in smug self-righteousness, but rather extend themselves to those who feel unloved, those who are at the margin of society. Even if they cause themselves to be at the margin of society through bad life choices, we should reach out to them and love them as God loves them. And may God bless us.